hear what they're talking about.
And how could it be happening in that map in the first 10 months of this year? We simply must ask this question. Police officers and leaders need to ask this question. Community leaders have to ask this question. Academics have to hit this hard. And we cannot wait. These are people who are dying in America's cities. We have to care about this deeply. This is not a problem that the rest of America can drive around. When I worked as a prosecutor, Deirdre's told you how old I am implicitly, in the 1990s, Richmond was experiencing, like so many American cities, horrific levels of violent crime. And just to say it that way, though, obscures an important truth. Because white people weren't dying in Richmond, Virginia. Black people were dying in Richmond, Virginia. Most white people could drive around the problems in Richmond. If you were white and not involved in the drug trade, either as a seller or as a buyer, you could escape the violence. You could make yourself apart from the violence. But if you were poor and black, there was no way to drive around the violence because it came with a drug trade that was everywhere in your neighborhood. That meant that violent crime dominated your life, it dominated your neighborhood, it dominated your world. Like so many people in law enforcement in that period of time, in the 80s and 90s, we worked very hard to try to save lives in Richmond, Virginia. By rooting out drug dealers, predators, by going after gangbangers and killers. We worked in large measure through a program that was started in 1991 and spread to hundreds of neighborhoods around the United States called Weed and Seed. And it went from 1991 to 2011 through multiple administrations. And the idea behind Weed and Seed was an acknowledgement that you cannot arrest your way to a healthy neighborhood. That you arrest so you can create space so that something healthy can grow and leave that neighborhood, that garden, in a healthier place. That as painful as it is, you must remove from that garden, from that community, those that are snuffing out its life so that good things can grow in its place. But you have to do both or you're wasting your time. And the idea behind Weed and Seed was if we focus on the hardest hit neighborhoods and try and pull out the worst offenders and in its place invest in the schools and in communities and families and neighborhoods and parks, maybe the dream was someday kids could play in these parks and maybe old folks could sit on the porch and watch those kids play. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing, we thought way back then. And as we did that work, I remember being asked in Richmond why we were doing so much prosecuting in black neighborhoods in Richmond and why we were locking up so many black men. After all, folks knew the truth. Richmond was surrounded by large suburban populations that were largely white. Surely there were drug dealers in the suburbs, people would ask me. And my answer was simple. We are in the neighborhoods where we're working because that is where people are dying. Those are the guys we lock up because they are the ones choking off the life of this good community. We do this work because we believe that all people are worth protecting, especially the most vulnerable. But here's the thing, the people asking those questions back in the 90s in Richmond were not the black ministers or the community leaders who were working and living in those poorest neighborhoods, because those good people in those bad neighborhoods already knew why we were there, locking up felons with guns and drug dealers with guns and drug addicts with guns. They supported it because they shared the dream of a neighborhood in which healthy things could grow. Those leaders, those ministers, they were the seeders who hoped to grow something in the safe space we were creating by weeding, something that they thought and hoped would be healthy and that would last. The pulling of those weeds, every single arrest, in a real sense, is a tragedy. I've told people I don't remember a sentencing I was ever happy at. In fact, every sentencing I went to, I was depressed because a life was wasted. But the work had to be done because it allowed churches and schools and community groups and parents to plant seeds that over the next 25 years grew into something remarkable because the dream came true. Old folks sat on porches in Richmond, Virginia and watched kids play in parks that were uninhabitable 25 years earlier. The strategy worked because it was about a whole lot more than just arresting folks. Now, why do I tell you this? I think that is the kind of work that's being done here, and understanding that you don't arrest your way to a problem, through a problem. Enforcement is vital, but if that's all you do, you'll do it forever. I think Project Longevity shows what can happen when law enforcement and a community come together and come up with solutions to problems jointly that are plaguing their neighborhoods. It gives gang members a second chance. It gives them a pathway out of their destructive lifestyles and invites them, as all of you know, to these things called call-ins, where they meet with law enforcement and social service providers and community members. These call-ins, these interventions are about delivering a message, which has a couple of parts. The first is, hey, we know who you are, and we know what you've been doing. But second, here's your chance. We can help you leave your gang lifestyle. We can help you finish school. We can help you get a job. We can help you get a driver's license. We can help you get a life. But they're also told that if the offer of a hand is rejected, they're on notice. If you do bad things, you will be held accountable with profound consequences, because we're not going to tolerate violence in the community. It's simply not fair to the rest of the folks. And a new study by Yale University, I am told, has found that Project Longevity works. Now, I have a personal bias here. My family is a big supporter of Project Longevity. My son worked last summer as an intern for the project and was thrilled by it. I'm going to pull out my personal cell phone. I want to read you a text he sent me, not about basketball or anything like that. He was so struck at one of the call-ins that he said this. At the first call-in, I went to a guy, and he says he remembers his name, talked about his experience getting arrested and losing years of his life. He told them, the audience, how much more money he would have made if he had been working at a fricking, that's my son's language, at a fricking McDonald's instead of sitting in jail. And he talked about having to tell his dad what he had done, who, if I remember correctly, died while he was in jail. Anyway, he ended up turning his life around. But what was so cool was how the gang members' body language changed. They were all looking down and dozing off during the law enforcement part. But as soon as this guy got up there, they all straightened up. You could see the respect they had for him. These kinds of guys are an amazing resource, indeed, an amazing resource. Brian, my son, also got a chance to participate in a hang time session in Bridgeport. This is a thing that I was surprised to learn about. Every Tuesday night, a few dozen returning citizens get together for a jail, and by that I mean returning from prison to the community. It is a next step for those who are seeking help. Hang time, of course, is voluntary, but it is an opportunity for people to see job listings, to even get a shirt and tie for a job interview, to get prep on how to talk to people, and together just to sit and talk about issues. The language, I'm told, and Brian told me, can be quite raw, and the topics are not for dumb people. Right? U.S. debt to China, not a conversation a whole lot of us would want to wander into for fear of getting embarrassed, but also race relations, the history of hip-hop, what everybody's bucket list is. Last month, I'm told, Bridgeport's 3 mayoral candidates spoke at a hang time gathering. It made those who attended feel respected. It made them feel that their voice, their humanity, not just their votes, their humanity mattered. I also understand that one of Deirdre's assistant U.S. attorneys attends most meetings, and he lives in West Hartford. I know everybody here knows Connecticut. That is not close to Bridgeport, although there's very little traffic in this area of Connecticut. Someone asked him, so why is a rich white guy choosing to hang out in the neighborhood with guys every Tuesday and driving so far to do it? And he explained it's because he learned something new in every hang time, like who really invented the moonwalk and the history of the Buffalo Soldiers. And he said he learned something from each and every one of those returning citizens. My son learned a lot as well. He found Project Longevity so rewarding, so exciting to see law enforcement part of trying to heal and help a community that he's decided he wants to be a police officer. So he's applying to be a police officer today. Yeah. Makes his mother nervous, I got to tell you, Chief, but it makes me extraordinarily proud. He said, I believe as a police officer I can do good for a community in a way that suits my talents. And I couldn't agree more. I'm very proud of him. Forums like this are vitally important to these conversations. We have to do everything we can to try and bridge the divide between law enforcement and the communities we serve. We got to talk about what's happening in our country. We got to talk about what we can do about it. We got to talk about what we must do about it. And if we don't, we risk losing the ground that we have gained over the last generation in reducing violent crime. We risk the loss of the dreams. We run the risk that those who are lucky enough not to live in those neighborhoods will just drive around it in America. The reason I feel it's so important for leadership in law enforcement to talk about this is not a time for not my neighborhood, not my problem. This is all of our problem. It is so great to see what you're doing here with Project Longevity and Hang Time. These kinds of programs are the things that bend the arcs back together. Thank you for that work. Thank you for that inspiration to an entire nation. Thank you for the good that you do. It is an honor for me to be a small part of it. Thank you very much.